Hello, BookTube, and welcome to the Future History Project. This is Isaac Asimov's Future History. Now, that's as opposed to others, but the most, other famous one is Robert Heinlein's, but this is strictly Hopefully I don't make that faux pas again and keep calling him Simak, but I don't think he would mind. But Isaac Asimov, he wrote many stories. He started in the late 30s and wrote right up to his death in 1992. Now, he had his biggest opus of writing, I guess, would be nonfiction books and essays on science, history, you name it. There isn't much that he has not didn't write about. But he wrote a lot of fiction too, and he was instrumental in a lot of foundational, pun intended, ideas for science fiction. And he wrote a lot of stories to do with robots and artificial intelligence, through robots as well as computers. And he went into the quite far future with not just with the robots, but with empires. There's the Empire novels, and then there's the Foundation novels. Just an extension of the Empire books and a galactic empire. And around, I guess, late 70s, 80s, he decided to string a lot of this stuff together as a future history. And so he started writing books to fill in the gaps. He never got quite fully finished because there's so much within this universe to talk about. So I decided, I've read all his material before, and a bit of other material that's set within that universe. But I decided, well, I'd like to read everything that includes Asimov's work as well as other writers. Now, I decided to call it. It wasn't a hard thing to come up with, the Future History Project. And I've enlisted a number of other booktubers in this, and a lot of viewers as well are going to follow along either with just the Asimov material, or the whole hog, as I am, and as Mark Richardson, who's a co-host, and Scott Bryant at the Bookish Bryants. I'll leave their links down below because they will be doing videos as well. So we're starting out in January 2022 with short stories, 5 short stories a week, and then we'll see how it progresses. Until we start getting into the novels. We'll be getting into the novels, not Asimov's novels yet, but there'll be a trilogy to do with robots coming up. Probably in March, maybe late February. I'd have to look at the schedule. We're going to go a month-by-month basis and adjust the reading schedule as it goes. And I'll link down below my introduction videos in the other co-hosts' introduction videos, and a list of January's readings. So I'm here today to talk about 3 stories, the 3 first stories that are mainly in The Complete Robot. This was put out in 1982, and that's an eponymous year, but we won't get to that yet. It'll be a few videos down the road. It's a collection of robot stories. Most of them had been in Irobot and the rest of the robots, but there were a number that were scattered throughout other periodicals, so they were all put together. And Asimov has not ordered these chronologically by whether he wrote them. He put them in categories, and nor chronologically within. The idea of the Future History Project is to try to read the stories chronologically within that universe. And what happened was the very second story here that we do, it's out of place a little bit. It's a while since I've read, well, it's about 12, 15 years since I read, 12 years, I guess it would be, since I read through Asimov's material last. And I used a lot of online sources to create this reading list, but it's not that big of a deal. It's not that big of a deal. You know, once we get after the short stories, and not all the short stories are going to be robot as well. There's going to be some non-robot short stories as well, a few peppered through there, either by Asimov or other writers. But anyway, let's get back to the first three. Well, first of all, I want to talk about the... he has an interesting introduction in The Complete Robot, and he talks about... when he finds that there's a couple classes of robot stories. First class, there is robot as menace, and he doesn't have to explain much, and then such stories are a mixture of clank clank and arg, and there are some things man was not meant to know. And he found that while he was reading this kind of stuff, they sort of paled on him. But the second class, which he says is a much smaller one, is robot as pathos, meaning like a bit of tragedy in it, and especially pathos stories will obviously emote emotions in the reader, and that's where he excels in. But occasionally he does have a little bit of menace mixed in there, either at the end, and we'll see in two of the stories, the last two that we got here. But he mentions two stories that really that he really liked, and it was Eando Bender, entitled Irobot. I will try to leave a link to that below, because I did for New Worlds November, I did Irobot as one of the stories, and I'll see if I can link that down below. And it's a very good story. And then the second one was Lester Del Rey's Helena Lloyd. I did not read that part of it, of the New Worlds November, but it's a great story. It was written in published in December 1938, I think it was, and Eando Bender was the Irobot was similar, I think, period. But anyway, Helena Lloyd is sort of, like it's a play on the words Helen of Troy and an alloy. I think that's what it was. But it's basically two friends. One's a roboticist, I guess you would say. He builds robots, so they want to build a better robot. So they build this woman. They call her Helen O'Loy. The one who's a doctor, he helps out for the physiological and making it the robot very human. So he's a way of treating a patient, and then he comes back, and the robot is very human. Emotions, everything, and has fallen in love with his friend, his partner, like partner in crime, in the sense, his research partner, and he doesn't know how to take this. His partner does, so he moves away a bit, but then the Helen continually pines for him emotionally, and then finally they get together and they live for their whole lives as man and wife. And where they move to, nobody knows that she's not human, and it was kept a secret. So it goes through the story a little bit, mostly about the early years, and then it ends where he gets a letter from Helen saying his friend has died. And she's not going to continue living either, so she's going to use acid to destroy herself. And it ends basically, with, he's going to try to cover it up so the locals don't know that she was. And it turns out he was in love with her all along as well. So those are the two stories he mentions. And he also mentions, and he says, and he makes sure that nobody forgets it, that he coined the word robotics. Asimov was not a modest person. Let's put it that way. But okay, the first story, which probably is a very, very, early in the chronology, internal chronology. There's no exact date for it. They've put down date of 1995, but that's a little iffy. Trying to find out when that was written. I forgot. I think that was written in the 70s. But it's called A Boy's Best Friend. It's a play on the word a man's best friend, which is a dog. It's a very, very short story. It's like 4 pages long. And it's set on the moon, a future moon, where a boy is born on the moon. So he's physiologically a little different. He's taller, longer of limb, and he gets around better in the lower gravity. But he has a little robot, a non-human robot, and that's the first section here is non-human robots. And he has it's like a dog robot. It doesn't look like a dog; it's like a square thing. But the boy clearly has become attached and loves his little robot, a robot. It's like robot mutt. It's a combination of a robot mutt for a robot. But the parents decide, well, they want to get him a real dog. And so they're talking, and they had sort of sent to Earth for a real dog, but it's in quarantine. So they tell their son that this is what's going to happen, and he's not too happy with it because he's very attached to his robot. And the one little thing he says, he's my dog, or something like that. And that reminded me of Old Yeller. The little boy says, he's my dog. And then I think in maybe Swiss Family Robinson, the same boy says the same line. But anyway, no, I thought that was pretty good. And then it sort of ends with them saying that, we'll find a good home for the robot. But, you're going to have a real dog, and they'll even get a spacesuit for the dog so he can go outside, on the moon's surface, which is kind of neat. I'd love to have seen the scenes with him in the dog in the spacesuit. But then, another friend that's doing this says, but he wouldn't want to clean the spacesuit. No, definitely not. But yeah, no, it's a fabulous little story. It's left hanging. You don't really know whether the boy kicks up a bigger fuss or anything like that. But it's very encapsulated into just this one little feeling, and it's a wonderful, sweet story. Characters are great. The boy is great, and it's to some you can want more. But I thought it was just nice the way it was, because it would have taken the story into a different direction if we would have continued on with it. But the way it was really good. And there's so much in there in so few pages about, the colonization of the moon, about, the boy being physically different, and then the quarantine of the dog, all this kind of stuff. Like, there's all sorts of little things in there that are really good in the relationship, that, they allow the boy to go out, in a hostile environment, basically by himself and his little robot. But then the second one is a much longer story. It's called Sally. And this one is dated, so this is out of place a little bit. But it's dated for 2057. And there's a farm for retired sentient, artificial intelligent cars who drive themselves. And the oldest one goes back to, I think, about 2015. And there's a caretaker. He used to be the chauffeur for the rich person there, so now it's a farm type museum. But the cars never get ridden in again. They can roam and do whatever they want. And Sally is the name of a convertible that he is sort of very attached to. And yeah, it's a wonderful story. It's very, I guess, Freudian, you would say, because there's a lot of sexual tension in there as well between him and the car, and the way the car does things, almost caresses him and he caresses the car, and the way the doors open up and all this kind of stuff. It's, yeah, you got to wonder what Asimov was thinking there. But And that one was done. Sorry, I didn't get the dates for those. I'll see if I can put those down in the description of the dates when they were originally published and where they were originally published. But yeah, so he goes on, but they get a visitor and somebody, it's very regulated of how they have positronic brains. That's why it's a later story. Positronic brains will come in later. But anyway, a visitor comes and he gets sort of, cars without engines, without the brain in a sense. And he wants to rip out the engines out of the cars on the farm and sell them, illicitly. And he'll split the money with this guy. And he's horrified at this, just totally horrified. So he kicks him off the property. But he comes back later with thugs at a big bus that's a sentient or an artificial intelligent with a positive brain bus, but it's been hacked up and, not really put back together very well. So the cars rebel against this and start chasing his men. And then he takes hostage I think it's Jake, the caretaker, and on the bus, and then Sally starts chasing them, and you could the bus and the other car. Well, she gets the other cars too to come and chase the bus, and they're all talking. They're talking together, not in words, but in some language. And Jake sort of the caretaker finds this out, but he finally the bus stops and lets the caretaker out, and then careers on with the guy, the visitor that wants to do all this. And we find out later that the guy is found in a ditch basically with tire marks on him, so the bus had killed him. And this is where it gets a little bit in the menace part at the end here, because the caretaker had been so fond of these vehicles. They're all named, like there's Giuseppe, everything, but Sally is his favorite. But he realizes that now that they're really talking to each other, and all the other vehicles that come along, they talk to them, and they're not even hiding it anymore that they're talking, or he thought they might have been hiding it before and did it on the sly. And it's just fabulous. But then he sort of thinks that, well, this is what happened because they must have talked in the bus, to say, get rid of this guy. And he's a little concerned. So his relationship has changed now with the vehicles, and especially with Sally, because he's thinking what if they really do decide in the end that they've been enslaved by man, and they decide to revolt. And he sort of, hopes that, well, maybe they'll keep a few humans alive to be caretakers and to help them. And that's sort of where it ends. But there's other interesting things that, obviously there is no shortage of gasoline or petrol or fuel, because these cars are continuously run, all the time. But no, it's a beautiful story as well. Characters are great. Asimov can excel in having, emotions for non-human things, and also Simak as well, but that's another. I can't not mention Simak. But anyway, the third one is called Someday, and it's a future, again, unsort dated, but it's these two boys that get together, and it's a world where nobody reads anymore. All of this is done to the computer. This is done by computers, artificial intelligence. In a sense, they tell stories. They don't read anymore. What they know is binary language. That's what they're taught in school. That's their language, but in order to program computers. So these two boys get together, and the one tells them about words and letters and stories, and they want to learn this in order to send secret messages to each other. It's like have a secret club, so nobody else will know what they're doing. But at the same time, there's a little thing, like a little computer called a Bard, that tells stories, and it's an old one. It's an antiquated one within this world, and it doesn't work that well. So they decide to tinker it with it a little bit and update a new story into it. but about computers. But the thing is, the little bard, the brain of this thing, decides to incorporate it into one of its previous stories, and just uses that kind of story, and and they said, oh well, it's not very good. There's new ones that will show pictures and movies and probably 3-dimensional, and well, they don't mention 3-dimensional, but you can sort of envision this. So they leave it, and as they go, one of them kicks it. Either, I can't remember whether it's accidental or on purpose, and the bard is sort of a little perturbed at this. So he actually creates a story about a bard that hasn't been treated that well, but then someday maybe they will rise up, and that's where it sort of ends as well, with the little bit of potential menace. So that's a bit of a shorter one. So we'll end it there with these 3 stories, and then I'll be back on Thursday with the last 2. I think it's the next 2 that are in here. Let me just check to make sure. Yeah, it's point of view, and then maybe think. I think. But anyway, so so that's the beginning. And if anybody wants to join, there's still lots of time. There's a lot of reading. It's going to go for a long time here, but it's going to be fun. And as I say, it's just a different way of. But if you haven't read the future history and all the stories, it may be a bit daunting and a bit confusing, possibly at times, to read the other material. But it can be done. It's just that there'll be things in earlier books that actually Asimov didn't put in until way at the end, and that's how and then you can sort of look back on this thing and go, oh, that's what those things were. But he didn't really plan that out at the time. But they more or less work. There's a bit of that you go, well. It may not have worked that well, but it's okay. So, it's a willing suspension of disbelief. And it's definitely has a sense of wonder for this. But yeah, so we'll continue on with this, and tomorrow I hope to, on my Tuesday science fiction, I hope to start doing a little sort of biographical sketch of Asimov. I'll be using at the beginning 2 things. No, that's not it. I don't have it here in front of me. There's an unauthorized biography of Asimov, which covers up until the 80s, I think. And then there's 4 sort of autobiographical stuff, but the 2 main ones here. This is the early one. This is very glaring. Sorry about that. But In Memory Yet Green, the autobiography of Isaac Asimov, 1920 to 1954. So I'll be talking about this tomorrow. In the first few years of his life, I was going to go up to sort of his first published story, but that might be a little too much for one video. So, and as I say, I'll compare it back and forth between the autobiography and the unauthorized biography, because I think he was pretty truthful about things, but he just may have left some things out. But I don't think that's going to be too much of an issue until we get later on with it. And also, too, I hope I have a lot of secondary material about Simek's writings, about Foundation, the robots, and so forth. I hope to be able to dip into those as well as we go along, and have little snippets about that, of what other people have said about it, or the evolution of the writing. Hopefully. So there we go. So it's not too late to join, to hop on board with the Future History Project. I'll see you next time, BookTube.